And now some CEOs have said that actually working from home could be holding people back, especially if they're at those early stages of their careers.
I got my promotion out of cycle, and that's like a pretty rare thing, but I had to put in like double, triple the work that my peers working at the in-person companies did.
Ema, so working from home was really big in the pandemic. Felt like everyone was doing it. We didn't really have many other options, but how many of us are still doing it now?
Yeah, so 330 million people around the world are still working from home, either partially or fully now. So I think in terms of if you go back to pre-pandemic, the cat's out of the bag, the genie's out of the bottle. You're never going to fully go back to the way it was pre-COVID. But you do see differences in industry. So the biggest industry for remote working is kind of the tech and information sectors. A lot of people in insurance and financial roles as well. But age as well is a factor. People under 24 don't work from home nearly as much as people older. So 7.2% of people aged 16 to 24 in the US work remotely, but that does get higher as you go through the age groups.
Interesting that age is a factor because there are so many pros. I found that there were lots of pros when I was working from home. So there was no commute, loads of flexibility. I could kind of do things my own way. But it also comes with that cost of, if you're still living with your parents, you're working at your parents' kitchen table, or you're with your flatmates and you're sharing the Wi-Fi and sharing a small space. And now some CEOs have said that actually working from home could be holding people back, especially if they're at those early stages of their careers.
Yeah, so Emma Greed, who's a founding partner of Skims, the Kim Kardashian shapewear and clothing brand, she told our friends at BBC Woman's Hour recently that basically her experience is that women are being left behind in terms of career progression because they didn't return to the office in the same numbers that men did. She was saying that that is preventing women from progressing through the ladder because they're not being as visible, they're not being seen in the same way that maybe their male counterparts who did go back to the office fully or 3 or 4 days a week are.
There's this really interesting divide between what workers, employees and bosses, employers think about working from home. So I read this stat that workers say that they're more productive, but employers say that they're less productive. Do we know how working from home affects productivity?
The bosses are saying people are less productive when people work from home. That's not really borne out in the research. It does depend on a lot of things though. So as I said, there are less people who are under 25 working from home, but those people do tend to be less productive when they are working remotely. We can go into the reasons for that, but there was a big study by a South African university that covered low, middle and high income countries. So it was a review of reviews basically, and they found that younger staff are more likely to be less productive than if they were in the office. But as you get up the career ladder, the productivity at home does increase.
Is that because they haven't built the skills and experience to maybe work as independently?
Yeah, because when you're more junior, you're tending to be doing more sort of collaborative work. So one study that South African Literature Review looked at was people who work in universities. So researchers tended to be more productive when you're working from home because research is kind of a solo activity. But people who worked in more collaborative roles like lecturing, they were less productive at home because it's just the kind of thing that you do with other people. And it's just easier to do that work when you're face to face and you're not dealing with bad Wi-Fi connections, people away from the desk and not responding to their Teams messages, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And when it comes to this idea that it could be harder to climb the career ladder if you're working remotely, do the CEOs who have said that, do they have a point here?
I think it is mixed. It does depend on a lot of factors. But yeah, I think for young people, it is very hard to work your way up and really make yourself known in such a competitive job landscape like we talked about before, if you're only in the office 1 day a week or if you're never in the office.
Yeah, it is a lot harder, isn't it? So I have been speaking to someone who started her career working remotely, and I'm going to play you a clip now. This is Vera.
I work full-time as a software engineer, and I'm also creating content on the side.
And you started your career working remotely. What was that like for you?
It was definitely not the experience I was expecting because of all the rom-coms and office dramas I was watching as a kid, somehow reminiscing my school years of COVID and, all the Zoom-based classes. When you're just alone in your home, there's no social circle provided to you because everyone just joins the meetings and then leaves. And there's no way you can communicate or make friends or join some activities after that.
How did you find working remotely has impacted your career progression?
I think my career was still pretty positive. I got my promotion out of cycle, and that's a pretty rare thing, but I had to put in like double, triple the work that my peers working at the in-person companies did, because when you're all in the office, it's kind of easier to provide visibility because your manager just sits like across the table from you and they see what you're doing and you can just come up and talk to them. But in remote setting, you have to do like, I would say, more work to bring visibility to your projects than actually doing the project. So I had like so many stuff to basically prove my worth. I had like every message documented, like every metric documented, and on every single meeting with my manager, I was like enforcing that. But yeah, like comparing to other peers that also were working remotely, I think a lot of them got promoted much later, and also like acquiring skills and learning is much harder. So you naturally just progress slower in your career.
And where would you choose to work next? What kind of working conditions would you choose for your next role?
I would definitely choose like in person slash hybrid. That's like the question I ask on all my interviews, like what is the in-office culture in the team? And that's one of like biggest factors I base my decisions upon.
It feels like it's a bit of a mixed picture, doesn't it? Because it isn't all bad. There are these massive benefits to working remotely. And we've also been hearing from other people about their experiences. So I'm going to play you some of these.
Hello, my name is Carol and I'm a 23-year-old computer science student from Brazil. Well, my first corporate opportunity was an internship at a big consulting firm in which we worked in a hybrid model, going twice a week to the office. And for me, the hybrid model is what works best because I love the flexibility of remote work. It makes it much easier to balance my classes schedules with my work schedules, but I also loved meeting with my colleagues in the office, and this has played a pivotal role in building up my confidence in a corporate environment that I think wouldn't happen if I was working in a fully remote setting. So when we are very early in our careers, at least that's how I felt, I tend to doubt my skills, and sometimes you wonder, like, should I have learned that at a university? Should I know how to execute this task? Being at the office has facilitated myself meeting with other interns and other people who were at the same level of career as I did and sharing experiences, and that made the journey feel much less lonely in the end.
Hi, I'm Jez. I'm originally from the Philippines and now I live in Adelaide, South Australia. When my team was working home for a while, I honestly think it would be perfect for me. I'm quite introverted, so the idea of having more of my own space, skipping the commute, and just getting on with my work was the ideal scenario. I definitely saw the benefits of working from home, but over time I realized that there were parts of my job that worked better in person. Like being able to ask someone a quick question or getting approvals or feedback right away made such a big difference. A big part of my job is creating content, and I found that much easier in the office. I got to know people from different teams. That gave me more opportunities to connect with people and in turn create better content to showcase what we do. So do I think remote work can hold you back? I think it can, but it depends on your role, the industry that you work in, and your experience.
Emma, do you have any tips for people who are starting out in their jobs who might want to incorporate some remote working or have a kind of more of a hybrid model but don't want to feel that they're falling behind in any way?
I think visibility is the kind of trick, whether that's kind of, just making yourself known every morning. Obviously, different workplaces have different kind of online, whether you're using Teams or Zoom or whatever. Trying to meet people in person, even if there is no office, could be say, like, can I meet you halfway, something like that. Asking questions, just really kind of trying to find out as much as you can in a way that you would if you were in an office and just saying, oh, could you show me how to do this? Or what was your thinking behind that kind of thing. And just kind of trying to be as human as possible, bring the kind of elements of friendliness into it. If you're logging on to a meeting, ask people how their day was before you get going, that kind of thing. I also think different kinds of people can really shine in the work from home setup if they're, maybe they're just very shy, they're very introverted, they get energy from being alone, or if they're kind of if they have a disability, if they're neurodivergent, if they have like the perfect skill set to do the job, working from home can really benefit them. But it is just about making those connections as much as you can if you're not physically seeing people face to face. And also, with bosses just being aware that, people can perfectly well do this job at home.
And Emma, you're a bit of our job agony aunt on What in the World. We've had you on the podcast before, and we did an episode together on job hugging, which is this idea of staying put in a job as opposed to job hopping and changing between jobs. And we got loads of comments on this one. People are really interested in jobs, and I want to read you some of the stuff that people were saying on YouTube and Instagram. So Aaron said, "Can't pay the bills with my anxiety," and Tyler said, "It's either job hugging or being unemployed." And this just reflects how difficult the job market is right now. So I want to ask you, is there any hope? Are things going to turn a corner?
Yeah, I think I went on a bit of a deep dive about this. And I think one thing that people might find a bit comforting is that the companies who laid off loads of staff, especially more junior staff, to replace them with AI, a lot of them are kind of realizing now that they need humans still to sort of oversee the AI tools or train the AI tools. There was a really interesting article in the New York Times written by a former head of information at Lululemon, the athleisure brand. The article was basically headlined, "Companies need to stop kidding themselves about AI." And this person was basically making the point that, like, you can't just lay off a lot of people overnight and replace all of their jobs with AI tools. You need the people to train them, to overlook them. So if you're worried that your job is going to be replaced by AI, maybe you can take some comfort in the fact that a lot of the companies who did that first are now realizing, oh, I think we overshot a bit. They're quietly hiring staff to replace some of the staff that they let go.
That's a really interesting take. Thanks so much for sharing it. And thanks for joining us again, Uma. It's been great having you on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
And if you want to watch that episode, you can find it on YouTube. You can listen wherever you get your BBC podcasts. And please do keep those comments coming. But for now, I'm Hannah. This is What in the World from the BBC World Service. And we'll see you next time.